Okay, folks, a lot of this is going to be a refresher, and I won't. I'll have my face on this first one, this first slide, and I'll make sure that I refrain from having that on the future slides going forward. So, at any rate, what I wanted to point out was that we spent a lot of time on the circular flow so far, but I wanted to go through it one more time with you uh, because it is that important. I keep referring to the circular flow throughout the course, and so I will be referring back to this. So this is something that I really want you to be very familiar with, okay? Anyway, so economics, again, study of scarcity. Think if there's a price on anything, and it goes beyond this, but anything that has a price associated with it uh, is representative of scarcity. Scarcity abounds. We have limited resources, and yet we have unlimited wants. We want all there is of everything that there is out there, really, when it comes down to it. Okay, so again, I just point out with the productive resource, we'll start with, again, with the circular flow. If you look on the left, you have the households, and on the right-hand side is the firms. And you'll see this uh, many, many times over different ways of presenting it and different by different economists, if you will. But basically, this is the one that I was kind of taught, and it seems to make the most sense to me. Very, very busy, but if you take it apart, it's like economics. It should be simple enough for pretty much everybody to understand. It takes a while. Again, this is economics, a different language. This is new, it's kind of a new way of thinking for most of you guys out there, and you may never have even encountered anything like this before. But again, it's my role to make sure that you kind of understand these things and gain a level of comfort and kind of currency, meaning um, kind of an understanding and making the material your own. Anyway, having said that, we have household on the left and the firms on the right. So this is representative of what we would call like a free market system without government involvement. So if you could also add in imports and exports, so international trade. So those three components, household firms, and also the international sector. And when you add in government, that's where we move away from the free market, where the markets are the determining factors so far as like price levels and so on and so forth, and we have government involvement. We'll get into that. That's a basic tenet of this course, is how government is woven into this mix between the household and the firm, and why it is, frankly, when it comes right down to it. So again, starting from the household provides those productive resources, the labor, capital, entrepreneurship, and land. And as I've said numerous times, I've gone through this, but it's still worth repeating. Again, that's the mother of knowledge is repetition is the mother of knowledge, and knowledge is the mother of wisdom, or so I've been told in the past. Um, so anyhow, that's the way it's kind of characterized. So we have labor, capital, entrepreneurship, and land. Labor is very, very straightforward. Labor is what we provide. We get our wages for. That's what we get our paychecks for the use of our labor. Entrepreneurship, those are the decision makers at the firm, and they are probably the most important part of this circular flow. It's not because they're better or this or that. It has to do with the importance of their role in terms of being that decision maker, because they get to decide, um, what productive resources are going to be employed at the firm, what those goods and services that are being produced by the firm for, again, for the household as consumer, what that mix is going to be kind of going forward. And so with that in mind, the importance of that is that everybody's depending upon them, the household specifically, in terms of the productive resources. They're dependent upon them to employ their productive resources, their labor, their capital, their entrepreneurship, again, themselves, the land. And so again, on that side, and then as a consumer, we depend upon wise decision making at the firm, so that the firm produces those goods and services that we desire, right? And frankly, if the entrepreneur doesn't do a good job, they're 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 fired. They're let go, right? And we'll get into that in a little bit greater detail. So that's the entrepreneur. Capital, capital. We talk about this. Physical capital. Physical capital is the automation. It's the labor. Excuse me. It's the automation, the factory itself, the all the stuff that goes into that firm, right? All the physical stuff that goes into that firm. That's the physical capital. Underlying that physical capital is the financial capital, and that's where we touch upon the owners of the firm itself. All right, shareholders, bondholders, etc. And lastly, we have land. Land is pretty straightforward. Land upon which we walk. Also, it's all the resources under the land, right? So again, this is our basic framework for the circular flow. The beginning part, that's the input mix or the productive resources that are flowing through the firm. And the firm then takes those productive resources and transforms them rather into goods and services, again, for the household as consumer. So in this transformation process, it's not just the productive resources, it's also, you can think about it in terms of the cost. So the cost of those productive resources are embedded into that output mix or into those goods and services, okay? And flowing back from the firm to the household, that's the income distribution, which is, again, compensation to the productive resources or the household for the use of their productive resources. The labor would be getting wages, interest would be coming from, that's the capital I had mentioned, the physical capital, the underlying part of that. That's the owners of the firm. Those are the people that actually own that physical stuff at the firm, if you will. They own the firm itself. Remember, the firm simply answers the question where production occurs, where the transformation process occurs, is at that firm. A lot of stuff going on, but again, this is worth repeating, and I want you to continue to work on this. So again, when we talk about the interest would be flowing back to the household for the use of their capital, their financial capital. In this case, would be like loans, lending money, and so on and so forth. That's where interest is. That interest comes into play. That compensation for the use of that financial capital for the use of their money, right? So they're being, you would expect that as well. You would expect some interest in, and you would also expect it's not just the interest you'd be getting, but also you want to ensure that you would be recouping your principal, your original, the amount that you actually loaned. That's kind of the substance of it. And we'll talk more about these things going forward. A lot of stuff here, right? So when we talk about profit, that's when we think about the firm paying to the productive resources for the use of it could be labor in terms of, the profit could be profit sharing for typical with the auto companies where they pay the labor, their employees profit sharing, a share of the profit for that given year. And also when we talk about profit, that would be going to the capital side, of course, the capital side being the underlying owners of the company. They would expect compensation too. This is where the profit comes in terms of profit could be measured in terms of if you're a shareholder, an equity owner, an owner in that company, right? You could be given dividends. Typically, dividends are, again, profit sharing for the owners of the company. And there's another form of that too, and that would be if you were to sell your shares of stock, that would be you recouping your principal plus hopefully if there's some appreciation of that stock, you could be able to sell it for a profit there as well. Okay. So that would what would be called capital gain. If you sell it for less than what you actually purchased it for, that would be called capital loss. At any rate, that would be the profit portion of it. And also, lastly, profit could also, of course, go to the entrepreneur. In fact, that is how the entrepreneur is compensated. So if you are the CEO, the decider in chief at a company, right? The president, blah blah blah. You could be paid a wage, meaning that would be for your labor. Maybe it's, be generous. It's $1 million a year, $1 million a year for your salary. And then you also have what are called stock options, and this is where you have ownership in the company, right? And the stock options are basically options, a possibility for the, in the event that the company improves, that the share price increases, you are awarded stock options, meaning maybe the value of the stock at the time was at $10 per share, and your contract, with that company is that if in 3 years' time, you will be able to exercise your stock options, wherein you could buy 1 million shares of stock for $10 per share. So in the meantime, over that 3-year period, you would like, of course, to do what? To drive up the value of that company. All right. So in the process of doing that, maybe it goes from $10 per share up to $30 per share, which means that you have 1 million shares of stock option where you could purchase for $10 per share, immediately turn around and sell that for $30 per share and make up how much of a profit? $20 million. So this is the way these things work, okay? So lastly, of course, would be rent. Rent is very, very straightforward. Rent could be the rent for the land upon which we walk, or it could be if you're pulling oil out of the ground, how much you're going to be getting per barrel of oil, if you will, etc. Anyway, that's the bottom part of this. The top part of this circular flow is, and we look at again, pretty straightforward, the output mix. And the outer ring. So let's go to the outer ring now. On the bottom, again, we have that income distribution, but we also see the taxes come out. That's before it arrives at the household. Taxes would be payroll taxes, your withholding taxes, Social Security, Medicare, again for wages, and at any rate, those would be your taxes that would be pulled out. Also, you would be pulling out savings, because remember, income, this is the income flowing back from the firm to the household, goes to 3 places. First, it goes to taxes. Second, it goes to, let me get my fingers in straight here. Second, it goes to your consumption, what you're going to be spending on your, your sustenance, your monthly expenses, etc. And lastly, the residual piece is saving. So that's going to be pulled out of the circular flow again. This is whenever there's stuff coming out, that's what's called a withdrawal. We'll get into that in a moment. And when it's going in, that's called an injection, meaning withdrawal is cause the economy to shrink, the circular flow to shrink, to implode. And if it's injections cause the economy to, did I just say explode? Anyways, to implode rather, on the withdrawal side. And for the flip side of that, again, that would be for the injections, it would be cause the economy to explode, to grow more quickly. Those are the injections. We'll get to that in a moment. Lastly, on this bottom part of the circular flow are transfer payments. Transfer payments are coming from federal, state, local government. They could also be private remittances as well, but nonetheless, these are, for the most part, federal, state, and local government remittances, things that are going back to the household, meaning Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, any kind of welfare payments that will be flowing from the government. Because again, that term income has a very, very specific meaning, that the income that we're talking about is measured over a period of time, and it is the income that you're receiving for the use of your productive resources for that specific period of time. So for the use of your labor, capital, entrepreneurship, land. You get the idea, hopefully. Anyway, onward we go. Top part of this, we're looking at the outer ring. So the inner ring is straightforward. It's household, going back to the consumer, the goods and services that, closing the loop, if you will, with that relationship between the household and the firm specifically. Going on the outer ring, starting from the household, the first thing you notice are imports. And then you have taxes, and we'll get into this in greater detail in the next slide or two. But imports are considered withdrawal because, first off, imports are things that we're bringing into the country, so we're not producing them ourselves. And if we're not using our productive resources, we won't be getting income, right? The other part of that is that we are also spending money that is leaving the country. Those are the imports. That's why it's leaving that circular flow and causing the circular flow to shrink, to implode, if you will. Taxes, so the previous taxes were withholding taxes before you received your income. Then the taxes that you're paying after your income would include such things as like sales taxes, excise taxes of any variety of taxes that are out there. Look at your cell phone bill if you dare to do that. If your parents are paying for it, I've said it in class before, don't bring that subject, it's a sore subject up for your parents. But if you happen to take a look at a cell phone bill, it's amazing how many taxes are taken out on such things as that. Anyhow, those are, again, they're considered what are called withdrawals or leakages. So the withdrawals or leakages would include taxes, saving, and imports. All right. And on the flip side of that are called injections on the top right quadrant, if you will, the outer ring. That would be investments, government expenditures, and exports. So we'll start with exports, even though it's on the bottom. Exports are, again, that causes the economy to explode or to expand because while those goods and services are leaving the country, they are nonetheless produced in this country, in our domestic, in the United States, for example, and the productive resources that are employed are being compensated for that income associated with those exports, right? And now going to the top part, when we look at investments, or what's called GPDI, gross private domestic investment, these are all the additions to the firm. These are the robots, the automated equipment, a new factory itself. This is all considered what would be called investment at the firm. This is that physical investment at the firm. And the reason that this is an injection causing the economy to grow, to expand, to explode in a good way, right? Is because all all that equipment is being produced where? In the domestic economy. And since it's being produced in the domestic economy, productive resources are being employed at the firm or another firm, if you will, if you prefer. And again, the income that flows back from the firm to the household is adding to the income for those individuals that are associated in the production of those robots, and so on and so forth. So that's investment at the firm, or gross private domestic investment, GPDI. These are things that we'll be talking about kind of going over and over again going forward. Lastly, it's that the government expenditures, or the GCE and GI rather. So GCE would be government consumption expenditures. GI is gross investment. This is just a breakout of how we're looking at things. It's more of an accounting artifice. And it's not just for the government, but this is the one place where we kind of talk about it, and that is that government consumption expenditures are things that are used up very quickly. So there could be pencils and papers, or paper that's purchased by the government, or people that work in the public sector like myself. That would be the income, right? It would be flowing, from the government, boom, and it's used up very, very quickly, right? Too quickly in my case. But anyway, there's also gross investment. That would be something that's long lasting. So that would be like aircraft carriers or something like that that hopefully last forever. Beyond that, though, if you look at it, so that would be for government. It also is the case for households. Households have something equivalent in terms of durable versus non-durable goods. That's part of those from the firm to the household, those goods and services, the output mix. So non-durable goods would be such things as milk, butter, things that are used up very, very quickly, versus durable goods would be like new automobiles, appliances, etc., right? And again, it's the same for business. Business is actually really, really straightforward, because this is something that if you take any accounting classes or whatever, when we start talking about expenditures. That's, spending kind of as two categories. One would be just the expense versus capital, really. Things that we use up very quickly, expense items; capital, things that last over various accounting cycles. So this is a big, I drilled down a lot on this, and we're going to be talking more on it, but hopefully this makes a bit of sense at this point. Okay, folks, as I said, there's a lot of repetition, right? So I took my face off this one, so you guys don't have to suffer through that. So at any rate, when we're looking at, again, our circular flow, the inner ring, this is the transformation process again, meaning the household provides those productive resources to the firm, and at the firm, those productive resources, the labor, capital, um, entrepreneurship and land are transformed into those useful goods and services, again, for whom? For the household, as consumers in this case. So included in that would also be, think about it in terms of cost, all the stuff that goes into that firm from the household, including this would also include taxes, and we'll get into that as we kind of go forward, but just kind of keep that in mind. All this stuff is transformed, and then the cost associated with those goods and services that are being produced are being passed on to the household, again, in the form of the prices that are paid for the household for, those consumer goods, if you will. All right. So again, the outer ring, if you think about it, it could be income versus consumption. So income, again, on the outer ring, that would be the income distribution, and consumption would be, again, on the top side, in terms of, so you're looking at this in income. Not all income, really. Let's walk through it. So not all income is consumed, right? Income goes again to taxes, consumer spending, consumption, and whatever's left over, the residual, actually goes to saving. In economics, we use the term saving versus savings. But again, I just wanted to kind of walk through this part. Again, this is very, very quick, but focus of this class, or not this class, but focus of, not entirely, but a major focus of this class is the circular flow. So I wanted to just impress that upon you. Okay, so again, focusing on macro, since this is a macro course, right? After all, we're looking at, taking the circular flow apart, we're looking at withdrawals, or leakages, as they're also referred to. Withdrawals and leakages would include, again, taxes both in terms of what's coming out before you actually receive your income, withholding taxes, Social Security, Medicare, etc., and then taxes after you receive your income for such things as property taxes, sales taxes, other forms of excise taxes that would be out there. Saving is called a withdrawal because we're not spending it, right? We're not consuming. So we're not adding to the circular flow. We're pulling out of the circular flow. However, that's a very temporary point. That's something, it's not good, bad. It's just that saving is pulled out. It's not consumed immediately. And lastly, imports. Again, imports are great. We love imports, but the problem with imports is that they're not being produced here, so we're not receiving the income associated with that production, nor, I should say, and also on the flip side of that, the monies that we're paying for those imports is actually leaving the company, if you will. So again, withdrawals are greater than injections. The economy is exploding or shrinking. If injections exceed withdrawals, the economy is exploding. And also when we reach that steady state, that's the equilibrium. We'll be talking about equilibrium, or I guess the plural term for equilibrium is equilibria, but at any rate, we'll be discussing equilibrium kind of going forward. So again, the flip side of those withdrawals would be the injections. The injections are, basically on the top right-hand portion. And even though consumption is not considered an injection, it's actually another term for injections are non-consumption spending. But I'm going to throw consumption in there anyway. This is something that's added to the economy, right? This is what drives the economy. By the way, when we talk about consumption, those are consumer expenditures really at the household, and that constitutes about 70% of the economy. So it's a huge, huge portion of the economy is driven by consumption, by spending, right? This is what causes that circular flow to really get flowing, right? Consumption is the most critical piece of this. So that's why it does kind of amuse me when I hear uh, in the media, the talking heads that are out there, right, that are saying, well, the consumption's important. Well, oh yeah, you never tell people why it's important, uh, because that's the lion's share of the economy that drives the economy. But nonetheless, this is something for you to keep in mind. That's why consumption is so very, very important to economic growth. And we've already talked about why economic growth is important. Nonetheless, onward with injections, GPDI, gross private domestic investment. This is again that production. These are the robots. These are the physical additions to a firm, or maybe in terms of like a factory, a new factory entirely. Um, so that's kind of the GPDI is kind of what goes into that firm in a physical sense, that physical capital, right? And the reason that that is an injection is because somebody has to produce those robots and all that automated equipment and so on and so forth. And yes, those resources that are employed at that firm that does produce those comes back to the household in the form of income. So again, and what do we do with our income? Pay taxes, we consume, a lion's share of that income goes to consumption, and the balance of it goes to those goes into saving. So good portion of it goes into that consumption piece. And then the GCE and the GI, government consumption expenditures, gross investment, this is government. So whenever government spends, keep in mind government typically doesn't produce all that much. Most of the time they're doing what? They're buying things also from the firm, whether it's automobiles or tanks or whatever you could think of. Government purchases a great deal again from the firm, and when they buy things from the firm has to produce those things, and in producing those things they have to pay their employees. They've got to pay for the use of those productive resources, the labor, entrepreneurship, capital, and land, and the income distribution goes back once again where? To the household, and the household does what? They spend. Okay, anyway, so that's the government side. So government expenditures are very important for economic growth. But again, caveat, these are just standalone, why they're called injections. Exports, again, are, if we talk about good, bad, there's a lot of good and bad in all of these things, if you will, but it's not good and bad, it's just on one hand or on the other, right? So exports is a classic example, of course, in terms of exports cause the economy to grow, injections, non-consumption spending, because we're producing those goods and services where? Here in the U.S. in our domestic economy. Okay? Sorry, I'm rattling these things off, but hopefully you're kind of getting the crux of where I'm going with this. So these are the withdrawals and the injections. So again, to reiterate, taxes, downside is that it's a withdrawal, causes the economy to shrink. Upside is that it funds what? Government, so that government can spend. Saving is the downside is that it's a withdrawal because you're taking that out of the circular flow. The upside is that the saving very quickly goes back into the economy in terms of investment, ownership in firms, expansion at the firm borrowing in order to grow the firm itself, right? And on the injection side, the consumption upside is obvious. We like to buy things to help grow the economy. We love to buy things, right? We're a consumer-driven economy. That's the upside. The downside, so it's good for the economy, right? Downside is that we're not saving as much, right? And we'll talk more about that. The GPDI, of course, the upside is that we're producing robots and so on and so forth for the firm, so the firm can produce more consumer goods. However, since we're investing at the firm for more consumption down the road, we have to forego consumption that we have now. opportunity cost comes into play, right? We'll talk more specifically about that going forward. And again, government expenditures, the good side is it helps juice the economy because government tends to buy things more but most of the government spending actually has to go toward, or not most of it, but a good portion of it is either injected back into the economy in terms of those transfer payments, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, um, or buying things that are being produced at the firm. Downside is that when government steps in, it squeezes out the consumer, right? Because the consumer can't spend as much because of those darn taxes. A lot of ups and downs associated with it, not just with exports. Again, we already mentioned exports, so exports again, the upside is that they're produced here in the domestic economy, and the income associated with that production goes back to the households in the in the domestic economy. The downside is that those exports leave the country. So you may have the income, but oftentimes you cannot buy. There's not as much. There's not enough, or I should say, there's less in the economy, domestic economy, for the household as consumers than otherwise would be the case. Okay, a lot of stuff here, folks. A lot of stuff. So again, just to reiterate, this is very, very quickly. Upper part of the circular flow, goods and services flow to the households, right? These are the consumer goods, right? In response to the household consumption, spending on goods and services. Household buys those in the goods and services markets rather. Decision on production, prices, etc. These are when we drill down. These are the micro, when we look at the various aspects of this circular flow, specifically drilling down, okay? Household sells, this is the resource markets on the bottom part. So this again refers to productive resources. Again, the bottom half of the circular flow flowing from the household to the firms in return for the rewards or income that's on the very, very bottom. Decisions as to which of these resources and how much of resource employed, as well as the reward of income, is determined in these individual resource markets such as labor, entrepreneurship, capital, land. These again are the micro emphases, if you will, on the circular flow. And always keep in mind that the most important part of this in terms of having the most power within the structure, this framework of this association between the household and the firm is the entrepreneur, the decision maker. While they have a lot of power, remember they're only in power as long as they are, they're taking care of their productive resources, in particular the owners of the firm, not just the labor and et cetera, but also the owners of the firm. If you're not performing, if you're not a profitable company, then they will get rid of you very, very quickly. Likewise, if you're producing goods and services that the consumer doesn't care for, they won't buy those goods and services again. So as much power as the entrepreneur wields, as the entrepreneur has, it's very, very limited. It's based upon how well they perform in an ongoing, this is something that is day to day. So there's lots and lots of pressure on the entrepreneur. For all the members of the household, really, we're talking about labor, the capital, entrepreneurship, and land. There's pressures throughout this, but the entrepreneur, because they are the decision maker, that's where the real pressure, and we shouldn't say the real pressure, but there's an expression called the sword of Damocles. It's not an expression. It's Greek mythology, I believe. It's Greek anyway. So the king, it's heavy rests the crown on the king is another expression, and so that you can picture the king laying in bed at night trying to go to sleep, and there's a sword that's hanging by a thread above his bed, and he's looking up at that sword and trying to go to sleep. That's the sword of Damocles. That is the role of the entrepreneur. It's great to be king. However, there's a lot of pressure that's involved, right? Yeah, I know we're moving through a lot of these things, and there's lots and lots of repetition. We spent a lot of time on the first circular flow, but there's reason to this, and that's because these are things that are going to come up over and over again in the class again. So opportunity cost, again, we've already talked about that as what we're foregoing. So another concept, again, with the circular flow is the concept of opportunity cost, our next best competitive option. Opportunity cost, we can think of it in the micro level or the macro level. So in essence, here we go, the definition. The opportunity cost means that what an individual, micro, or a society must give up in order to obtain something, given the presence of scarcity. Again, we can't have all the things that we want, right? Uh, we have limitations, and it's not just for individuals, micro sense, also society, the macro sense, right? So if we choose, for example, to spend our income on an automobile, we have to ask, what are the other things that we would also desire that we cannot have? So the opportunity cost is measured against that next best option. So rather than buying an automobile, uh, let's step back. So we've got a choice of buying an automobile. You're going to buy a new car or a used car. The opportunity cost, you have to weigh that out. You say, by the way, when we talk about this, in this case, this is a trade-off, meaning this is how we kind of illustrate what happens in terms of an opportunity cost. So we opt to buy the new car, but what are we doing? We're foregoing, it's going to take us maybe 3 or 4 years to pay for the car, as opposed to if we bought a used car where we could pay for it either upfront in cash or in a smaller amount in total, or it would be you could pay for it like in a sooner manner, in a sooner time frame. Um, Anyhow, you get the idea. This is when we're talking about opportunity cost. We're weighing things out. And by the way, folks, we do this on a daily basis. Do we stop and get gas at this corner station, or do we go wait until the afternoon? When prices might go down, and might go up, they might go down. So we have to weigh these things out in our mind. And we do this with anything and everything, and we do it dozens, if not hundreds of times a day. So always keep this in mind. Opportunity cost is something that we are dealing with on an ongoing basis, right? And there's no way around it. So if we choose, for example, to spend our income again on auto, so those things that we can't have, we bought the automobile, are what is called the opportunity cost of that automobile, our next best opportunity, right? Next best choice, next best competitive option, I should say, more specifically. Opportunity cost is not an out-of-pocket cost. Nonetheless, it is a real cost. We know this, right? So example, this goes way back. I gave $100 to my niece when she graduated from high school. Again, a long time ago. I'm not terribly cheap. Once I decided to give her the money, my opportunity cost becomes what's referred to as sunk costs. Sunk costs are irretrievable. We all have made decisions and regretted things, but sunk cost in economics is a very, very important lesson because we cannot retrieve that sunk cost. We cannot change what has occurred in the past. All we can do is alter things going forward based on what? Measuring out these opportunity costs. And do we make mistakes? Absolutely. So once I gave my niece the $100, I was done with it. I could have had nothing to do with it. The opportunity cost now is transferred onto her. What was she going to do with the money? Was she going to consume it, or is she going to save it? That was up to her. I never really asked her, but she talked about different things that she was thinking about doing, buying clothes or going to a concert, or I don't think I heard anything about saving, but could have been too, right? Nonetheless, that's on her. That's her opportunity cost. I'm done with this. So again, the lesson you learned is that you cannot have your cake and eat it too. Meaning that yes, you can see your piece of cake in front of you, but once you eat it, it's gone. There's nothing you can do about that, right? That's where the expression comes from, and all these things have. Uh, Most of these expressions that we see out there have some economic basis, whether or not they're based on economics. You can see the choices that we make all the time in the world, right? So when we're talking about it, that was mostly micro that we were discussing with opportunity cost, but there's also on the macro side or macroeconomic side, we have opportunity costs associated with it, and that's where the government involves itself legislation to perhaps promote more economic growth. Tax cuts. So if your taxes are cut, you're paying less taxes, which means what? You can spend more on, to consume more, and that can cause the economy to, to grow and, so on and so forth. You could also put tax, reduce taxes perhaps on companies that are going to, to invest in more capital equipment. And you're able to do some different things. And a lot of the stuff that we're seeing right now, and it will be interesting. We'll talk more about these things going forward. But you could do something that will promote the purchase of capital goods, and we'll get into what that means in a moment. The idea is that the capital goods would be things that go into the firm, that plant equipment, that those robots, etc. So once again, opportunity costs are also in this macro sense, and that if there are fewer consumer goods, um, uh, again, less consumer goods will be produced for and purchased by the public, meaning that if government steps in and kind of spends more, and if it spends more, it needs more taxes, and that if their taxes are higher, it reduces the amount that we can consume. So there are opportunity costs that are going on all the time. Opportunity costs in this case, we're talking about current consumption versus future consumption. So invest in things right now so that we will be able to consume more later on. Keep that thought in mind. Same things in terms of war. There's an old expression, guns or butter. Are we going to produce more guns, or are we going to produce more butter? If we have to produce more guns, we forego butter. World War II is a classic example because of all the production that was geared toward war material for tanks and bombs and planes and so on and so forth. There were fewer resources that were dedicated, firms that were dedicated to producing normal consumer goods, the durable and non-durable goods, right? Anyway, these are the options that are out there that we deal with this opportunity cost. So again, this concept of opportunity cost has a multitude of manifestations because we deal with it all the time, every day in our lives, and it's not just on a personal level, micro level, if you will. It's also very much so on the macro level when we make political decisions, based on what it is that we want our society to do. We want to build more weapons. We want to, we want to expand our expand our firm size, if you will, expand, to grow the firm. Then that is going to come at a cost. There's a cost associated with everything. Again, this is where opportunity cost lives and keeps hitting us over the head time and time again. Okay, so finally we're on to our production possibility curve or frontier. You'll hear these things in economics. They mean the same thing. Production possibilities curve, production possibility curve, production possibilities frontier, production possibility frontier, PPC for that production possibility curve, or PPF for the production possibility frontier. They're the same, okay? Anyway, so that curve, what that represents is that if you look at our little graph here, they've got very simple stuff, right? Consumer goods are on the y-axis or the vertical axis, and capital goods are on the x-axis or the horizontal axis. They could be either way around. We're just looking at two things. So two options in this economy. We're looking at consumer goods and capital goods. How much is going to be produced? And what the outer line represents. That line B, if you will, that's the production possibility curve or frontier. All right. So what that means is that when you're on that point, you're using all of your productive resources. So the space between the line, the curve, and the origin on the bottom left where consumer goods and capital goods come together, all that space in there, that quarter circle in this case, those are all of our productive resources. And so if we're using all of our productive resources, our labor, entrepreneurship, capital, land, to the best of their ability, we're out there on this production possibility curve or frontier. And this is what we call efficiency. This is what we call productive efficiency. Efficiency meaning that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. We're using all of our productive resources to the best of their abilities. See, all this stuff kind of comes together, hopefully. Um, and again, very simple presentation, but there's a lot that's going on here. So again, when we're looking at why it is that it bends, and this has to do with our old friend opportunity cost. Because if you think about it, if you want to produce more capital goods, it's going to come at a cost of fewer consumer goods. So if you're going to build more tanks and more material, more guns, then there's going to be less available for money, for butter, so for those consumer goods. Conversely, if you want to build more consumer goods, if you want to produce more consumer goods, it's going to come at a cost of fewer capital goods. So let's identify this again. Capital goods are those robots, and adding to the factory, adding to that our factory in terms of the physical capital that goes into that factory, as opposed to consumer goods. Very straightforward. That's for the household. Durable goods and non-durable goods. Durable goods again would be appliances, automobiles, etc. Things that are long-lasting versus non-durable things that we use up very, very quickly. And capital goods, again, are those robots and so on and so forth that we're producing at the firm. And the question is, why do we produce capital goods at all? Because we're going to increase our efficiency by producing more capital goods. It will enable us in the future to push this production possibility curve out so that we can do what? Produce more consumer goods. All right? This would be, think about it in terms of technology. Why do we employ technology? Why do we go with more automated equipment? Because we want to do what? To increase our productivity, to increase our efficiency. All right, so again, to walk through. So the curve represents all those fully employed resources, labor, entrepreneurship, capital, land. Again, capital goods are for future consumption. That's the reason why we opt for those, for these capital goods to help produce the production of consumer goods, to enable us to produce more consumer goods. Consumer goods are what we need right now to sustain in terms of durable versus non-durable goods. So another point of this is a kind of a tangential or along the same lines as when we talk about imports or exports. So imports allow us to go beyond our current possibility curve. So in order to get to C, the dotted line C, for example, we have to somehow push ourselves beyond that, because at the current point, all we can do is operate in a productively efficient manner at that point B. So in order to push out further, we can do a variety of things. One would be by adding more technology, increasing our productivity, meaning spending more capital goods, foregoing some consumer goods, so that we can do what? We can push our production possibility curve out. Or, and I should say, and or, how about both? We could import more. We could import more consumer goods, so that would enable us to do what? To produce more capital goods. Again, those are the lines that we're talking about. To push those lines out to C, we could import more. So there's a positive portion associated with imports. There's also the downside, meaning that the goods are not being produced in this country, in another country, and also the dollars are flowing out. Hence, when we talked about the withdrawals, okay? Exports, again, there's good and bad associated with exports. The positive are it's an injection because we're producing those goods and services here in the U.S. For example, the downside is that we don't get to consume the goods that we just produced because they have left the country. So lastly, when we're talking about this production possibility curve or frontier, and there's a lot of information here again, we're looking at what it's called allocative efficiency, though. So that's when let's start with productive efficiency, even though it's underneath. Productive efficiency is any point along that production possibility curve or frontier. We're using all of our productive resources to the maximum of their capabilities. Allocative efficiency is when we want to do what? This is where opportunity cost comes in. Are we going to produce more consumer goods? So if we want to produce more consumer goods, it's going to come at a cost of fewer capital goods. So that's when we're sliding up or down along this production possibility curve or frontier for a variety of reasons, any variety of reasons. Lastly, so B is the line that's marked by B. That's our production possibility curve or frontier. C is where we could be, but where we cannot be right at this moment, right? How we get there, more technology, maybe imports, any combination thereof to push that production possibility curve or frontier out. And the reason we know this happens is that we can see it illustrated in terms of, think about farming in 1895 versus farming in the late 2020s, if you will. Most farming at that point, again, going back to the turn of the century, as in 1900, 1895, that was primarily a labor-intensive operation. There weren't even any tractors available at this time, so this was all done with oxen or horses for plowing, and it was very, very, very much so labor-intensive. As opposed to today, farming is a much, much more capital-intensive endeavor, meaning that we're using much more, machinery and equipment is really what it comes down to. Where to farm a 200-acre corn farm producing corn in the year 1900 probably would have taken dozens of people to help in terms of plowing and in terms of harvesting. Whereas today you might be able to do it in a morning or an afternoon with one person with a reaper so far as harvest is concerned. Likewise, other areas would be like in mining. You could see someone with a pickaxe, a shovel, and a wheelbarrow digging out coal today. That would have been 1900 or before. Today there are these monster pieces of equipment, capital, right? Moving more toward capital. So that we're doing why do we employ that capital? Why do we employ that technology? Because it becomes much more efficient. We increase our efficiencies, we push this production possibility curve out, all right? Lastly, the point A is where we're inside of our production possibility curve, and so this means that we are not efficient, operating efficiently. Whether we're talking about allocated efficiency or productive efficiency, we are within that curve, meaning that we are not using all of our productive resources, because again, that space between that production possibility curve B and the axis where the consumer goods and capital goods come together, in the corner, all that space, that quarter circle, represents the use of our productive resources, and if we're not using all of them to the best of their ability, meaning being on somewhere along that production possibility curve or frontier. If we're inside, we are not using all of our productive resources. So think about it in terms of unemployment. We would have unemployment in that case. Okay, so again, kind of wrapping this up, and there's a bit more here, but I'll just want to cover, just to walk through again, opportunity cost this is our production possibility curve once again, and any point, if we're operating at point A versus point B, this is again indicative of that allocative efficiency, where in this case we're moving from point A to point B, where we're producing fewer consumer goods, we're producing more capital goods at the cost of fewer consumer goods. This is again an indication of what that production possibility curve is all about, illustrating the opportunity cost, why it is that it's bending. This is concave, yes. I always forget, concave, convex. I believe this is concave. Why it's bent like this and not just a straight line. Okay. Again, what we can do to push beyond our production possibility curve. A classic example would be via technology, adding more technology, all right? And inside that production possibility curve is unemployment of some sort, where we're not using all of our productive resources. So very quickly, we're talking about different types of economies. We start with Adam Smith, 1776. He wrote a book called An Inquiry into the Nature and the Causes of Wealth of Nations, or just The Wealth of Nations for short. And in that book, he covers a lot of ground. The main, I don't want to say the main point, but the point that most people he covered, it was unbelievable thinking about in 1776. We really didn't have, true free market economies at all. It was much, much different environment. And nonetheless, he was able to envision what it kind of could be or should be, perhaps. Um, Certainly, so Adam Smith is considered like the kind of the father of modern economics. Economics has always been around. We've always had to deal with such things as opportunity cost, for example. But it was important because he put all this stuff into written form, if you will. And it's very, very interesting, very important book. This is one of those books that if you have a first edition of this, not just that it's old as heck, 1776, but also because it was so important to the world. These are one of the prized possessions if you can have one of these in your library, along with such things as like Gutenberg Bible, uh, along those lines. Very, very important book. It also happened to coincide with our 1776, the year of our independence, which frankly he was around at the time, obviously, and he had a lot to say about that. He was very uh, he, he was very, very pro-America, if you will. Still thinking British, but in terms of the 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 movement toward America in terms of the center of the economic world, frankly. So he was kind of prescient. He was a person before his times in many ways. Anyway, there's an expression called the invisible hand of competition. It's only in there a few times in this book, but basically what he's saying is that by pursuing your own self-interest, you can't help. He had a lot of different sayings like this, but by pursuing your own self-interest, you can't help but to better the commonweal or to better society, right? So example of that would be again. Um, well, I'll just walk through this very, very briefly, and we'll talk more about this at another time. But uh, what he was referring to is that so let's just take this for example. You have one restaurant in town, and that restaurant is uh, producing, for lunch. There's lunches are $15 for lunch. Okay, inflation. Anyway, so $15 for a lunch, and so you go into the restaurant, you pay your $15, get your lunch, and the owners of the restaurant, there's no other competition, so what do? They think, oh, this is a very popular place, so I'm going to raise prices. Sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Remember, this is economics, folks. Yes, you want to be as profitable as you possibly can. If you have demand for your product, you're going to try to raise the price if you can. We'll get into this greater detail, going, the actual mechanics of this kind of going forward. Nonetheless, it's pretty straightforward. Should make some sense there. So you raise prices, and law of demand kicks in. So there are fewer. Um, so there's less of a demand, if you will, the quantity demanded of your product. Nonetheless, so long as it's more profitable, you know, the increased profitability makes up for any loss of customers that you might have, then you're going to go with it, right? So what Adam Smith is saying is that the invisible hand of competition is that when you have that type of an environment where there is no competition, they can pretty much control prices. So how you can how it and that is not beneficial, obviously, to the consumer. The way the consumer benefits from what? Lower prices. So we all like our prices lower, our quality halfway decent, and we like them in abundance. So let's just say, for example, the prices go up to $25 for lunch, and people are not happy about it, and another restaurant opens, and guess what happens? Prices come down. They stabilize perhaps because if that second restaurant comes in and prices at $25, um, they're not going to, they realize very quickly that they could actually become more profitable by what? By offering that $15 lunch once again, right? That was out there before. The other company was surviving, the other restaurant was surviving, and they were somewhat profitable. So this other new restaurant could certainly be profitable at that level as well. So they go ahead and do it. And what happens is that they steal customers away from the other restaurant. And in the process, the other restaurant, if they want to stay in business, what do they have to do? They have to lower prices too. So they lower prices not to $15 for lunch, but to maybe $12 or $10 per lunch. And trying to make sure that the quality is as good as they possibly can match up. And again, this is that competition. This is that indivisible hand of competition. By pursuing your own self-interest, as an entrepreneur, if you will, as the owner of a restaurant in this case, you can't help but to take care of consumers, because guess what? Consumers are going to vote with their wallets, with their purses, etc. And if they can buy something pretty close to the same thing, meaning a substitute, uh, on par with the other thing, then what are they going to do? They're going to opt for that other thing, and it goes back and forth. This is that spirit of competition that comes into play. Anyway, more about that as we go forward. So specialization of labor, this is another thing that he found, was that think about it in terms of Henry Ford, classic example, producing vehicles on the assembly line, where you've got one person that's putting on wheels, one wheel, maybe two wheels on both sides of the vehicle. Maybe two people putting on one wheel and just kind of moving forward. So that specialization of labor helps you produce to be more efficient, right? Think about it in terms again about the farm. We're labor intensive, moving more toward capital intensive, employing more technology, making that process more uh, um, making the process more efficient. And he observed this in a pin factory model that he saw, meaning that if you think about a pin, production of a pin, and I'm talking about just a regular little pin with a point on the end, a wire pin with the head with a kind of a head on the back, and then also the point, the pointed part of it. So if you think about one person making one of those, it might take them a while. They might be able to produce 100 in a day. Whereas if you had everything divided up, someone who cuts the pin to length, another one who sharpens it, another one who makes the head of the pin, another person who welds that head of the pin on, another person who polishes it and finishes it, you might be able to produce thousands in a day. And this was his thought. The downside, of course, is that could be somewhat dehumanizing. We've all experienced that. If you've had a chance to work at anything, it's repetition is part of most of our lives, but that's the price that we pay for increasing this productivity. All right. So again, there are different types of economic systems out there. What we've already described with our circular flow is that free market economy. Again, that's a circular flow without government involvement. More specifically, when we include this invisible hand of competition, so long as there's sufficient competition, that keeps prices down for whom? The household as consumer. Keep that in mind, folks. Again, we'll be discussing this a bit more going forward. It'll be continued discussion in this class. So we as household, as consumers, we like our prices low. We like good quality stuff. We like it to be plentiful, kind of those three components. But however, the problem is we've got competing interests. The household has provided us those productive resources. We want to get the maximum amount that we can possibly get for the use of our productive resources. So that's always in conflict with each other. Nonetheless, remember, how many of us are consumers? We're all consumers, but not all of us work for that specific company or that specific firm. We work for different firms. So we all benefit from on the consumer side, whereas the productive resource side, not so much. We'll talk more about that again going forward. So when there's government involvement, that's kind of a mixed economy, and again, which is depicted in the circular flow with the introduction of government. Depending upon how much government is involved, that's where we move from that mixed economy to a command economy, and that would be like a communist environment where the government is the entrepreneur. The government makes the decisions. Where, just think about it, just envision this. There are 5 of me that are making decisions for the rest of you people, right? The rest of you guys have to, have to depend upon me for making good decisions for you. And guess what? I don't trust myself either. So keep that in mind. This is where more government involvement is. They're the ones that are making the decisions as the entrepreneur. What productive resources are going to be employed, how much those productive resources are going to be compensated for the use of their productive resources, for their labor, entrepreneurship, capital, land, and also what the consumer's needs are. So would you trust me with uh, with guessing correctly on what it is that you want? I don't think so. I don't trust me for that either. It's a tremendous amount of responsibility, and as difficult as a market system is, it's think about trying to control, a herd of cats. Good luck with that. You've heard that expression before. Herding cats. It's very difficult. Nonetheless, it works. It doesn't work great all the time, and it might take a while, but it does work, and it works. It's worked very, very well. So the flip side of that again is that command economy or communism. That's the other absolute end. With some government involvement, it's somewhere in between, depending upon how much government involvement there is, and you can kind of measure it by the amount of taxes that are taken up by government. And because remember, taxes take away from your ability to consume and your ability to save. So higher taxes, less there is for you to make decisions. And I think all of us as consumers would prefer to make decisions, our own decisions for all of our income. But this is where we kind of put up with some government. How much, that's kind of a fluid question that's out there we'll be talking about going forward. Last thing is barter. Barter is very, very straightforward. We're just paying. We're not using money. We're exchanging, and we do this all the time. We do this for for our parents. Doing this and doing that. They may compensate us, maybe not. But an example I have is that doing the lawn for my neighbor, she would pay me in terms of goodies, like pies or cakes or something like that, and I'd cut her grass, and I wasn't expecting anything in return. Nonetheless, it's still barter, right? I never turned down pastries, right? Regardless, this is barter. It's still ongoing. We do it all the time. It's just not the most prevalent form that we have. Countries still do barter, where you're exchanging, uh, where you're, in essence, it's more so in the past, but we still do it today, regardless. So that's barter. That wraps it up, folks. Good job. Thank you.